There's probably a roll of paper sitting on your kitchen counter right now. You paid for it, and before long, you'll tear off a sheet, wipe up a little water, and toss it in the trash. An hour later, you may jar the same thing again. Then you'll repeat it tomorrow. By the end of the year, you may have spent somewhere around 80 to 100 on paper that was used for a few seconds and then thrown away. Every sheet will be gone, and none of it will ever be useful again. My family has never bought paper towels during my lifetime, not once. I'm not saying that as if it's some great achievement. It isn't. It's simply a habit we grew up with and never abandoned. But I want to show you what we use instead. More importantly, I want to explain the entire system because this isn't as simple as pulling one worn-out rag from a closet and expecting it to replace everything. There's a fractal way this. Once it's cracked to correctly do this, you won't miss paper towels and it won't create any more work than what you're already doing. Before we begin, I'll mention one thing and then leave it alone. I've collected many of these older household practices in a book that's available online. It's there for anyone who's interested. That's all I'll say about it. Now let's talk about rags. The most important part of this subject is understanding what a paper towel really is. Once you see that clearly, everything else is only a matter of method. A paper towel is something you purchase for the specific purpose of throwing it away. That's its entire function. It's manufactured somewhere, transported across long distances, packaged in plastic, placed on a store shelf, sold to you, used for perhaps 4 seconds, and then discarded permanently. After that, you have to buy another roll. That isn't how a real tool works. A tool is something you own and continue using for years. Paper towels are closer to a subscription. One you've been paying every week without thinking of it as a recurring bill. A rag is the complete opposite. A rag usually begins as something you already own. Maybe it was a shirt that became too worn to wear. Maybe it was a bath towel that turned thin in the center, a bed sheet that tore, or a piece of cloth that had reached the end of its original purpose. You didn't purchase it to be a rag. It became one after completing its first useful life. That's what makes it so valuable. When a rag gets dirty, you don't immediately throw it away. You wash it, put it back into service, and use it again. A well-made flannel rag in our home has been working since before our youngest child was born. So the real choice isn't simply between paper towels and rags. The choice is whether you want to keep purchasing the same disposable item forever or take something you already own and use it repeatedly. My grandmother wouldn't have understood why anyone needed to debate the matter. If someone had shown her a roll of perfectly good paper designed to be used once and thrown away, she probably would assumed it was a joke. She kept a rag bag hanging from a nail behind the kitchen door. It was an old flour sack with a drawstring, and I can still picture it as clearly as if I were standing in that kitchen today. Whenever one of my shirts became too worn at the elbows to repair, she didn't put it in the trash. She sat at the table with the shirt across her lap and began cutting it into useful pieces. I remember watching her one day and feeling a little sad about losing the shirt. She must have noticed my expression. "The shirt isn't used up," she told me. "It's only finished being a shirt." Then she lifted one of the cloth squares she had just cut. "This still has years of work left," she said. "It'll dry your hands and clean the table long after you've forgotten you ever wore it." That idea stayed with me. It also describes a much wiser way of looking at the things around us. In her home, very little was considered completely finished. An item simply moved on to the next task it was still capable of doing. A shirt became a cleaning rag. When that rag became too damaged for the kitchen, it went out to the barn. Once there was almost nothing useful left, the final scraps could go in the fire and provide a little warmth. There wasn't a sudden end where everything was thrown away. Each object passed from one useful purpose to another until it was honestly and completely spent. I've never seen a household operate more smooth than hers did. Now we need to discuss the method, because the method is what determines whether this system succeeds or fails. This is where most people make their first mistake. They decide they're going to stop buying paper towels. Then they take one old towel from the closet and expect that single piece of cloth to handle every mess in the house. It doesn't work. They use it to wipe grease from a frying pan. 5 minutes later, they need to clean the dining table, but the only rag they have is covered in grease. They try use it anyway, spread grease across the table, become frustrated, and return to buying paper towels. That doesn't mean rags failed. It means one rag was never enough. The system only works when you have a proper supply and divide the cloths according to their purpose. So let's build that supply correctly. The good news is that you probably already own everything you need. You shouldn't go to a store and purchase brand new cleaning rags. Doing that would miss the point entirely. You collect them from items in your home that are already near the end of their original lives. Look for old cotton t-shirts. Those are often the best cloths of all, and I'll explain why in a moment. Old flannel shirts work well too. So bath towels that have become frayed in middles, torn bed sheets, worn cotton napkins, old tablecloths, pillowcases, and flannel pajamas that children have outgrown. Old cloth diapers, when available, are exceptionally useful. When any of these items can no longer serve their original purpose, don't send them directly to the trash. Take them to the scissors instead. Remove any buttons first and save them in a jar. Buttons are useful, and there's no reason to waste them. Next, cut away the seams, hems, collars, and other thick stitch areas. Those sections don't absorb moisture well, and some of them can scratch delicate surfaces. Cut the remaining flat cloth into squares, roughly the size of your open hand, perhaps slightly larger. One shirt may provide 6 or 8 useful rags. A single bedsheet can produce dozens. Now we come to the part that makes the entire system practical, the part most people are never taught. Don't keep all your rags in one pile. Divide them into 3 separate groups. The first group contains your best, softest cloths. Old cotton t-shirts that have been washed repeatedly until they're thin and gentle are ideal. These are your fine cleaning rags. Use them for kitchen counters, tables, glass, drying hands, or gently wipe a child's face. They're clean, soft, and unlikely to scratch anything. Keep them folded in a kitchen drawer or placed in a clean basket where they're easy to reach. There's a reason a worn cotton t-shirt can become one of the best cleaning cloths you will ever own. A brand new towel or stiff piece of fabric oft performs poor when wiping water. Instead of absorbing the liquid, it tends to push it around the surface. Cloth that has been worn for 100 days and washed 100 times behaves differently. Repeated use removes the stiffness. The fibers loosen, soften, and open. That soft, loose structure absorbs water quickly and holds more of it. Those are exactly the qualities you need in a wiping cloth. In other words, the characteristics that made the shirt unsuitable for wearing, the softness, thinness, and wear, are the same qualities that make it excellent for cleaning. It didn't become worthless. It became better suited for another kind of work. The shirt had to wear out before it could become truly useful for this particular task. That's a worthwhile thought, and it applies to more than fabric, though I'll leave the other examples for you to consider. The second group contains your rough work rags. These can be cut from old towels, heavier cotton fabric, or flannel. Use them for bigger floors, grimy pans, muddy shoes, and other heavy cleaning jobs. Store these in a bin rather than a clean kitchen drawer because they're meant to become properly dirty. The third group is made up of disposable rags. These are the worst pieces, the ones with holes, stains, or fabric that's nearly worn through. Use them for jobs so filthy that you don't want the cloth back afterward. They're useful for cleaning stove drip pans, wipe machinery, handling foul messes, or tackling anything that would be unpleasant or impractical to wash. When one of these rags has finished such a job, throw it away without hesitation. It had almost no useful value left, and it still managed to provide one final service. This answers one of the most common objections. People often say they don't want to wash a cloth that has touched something disgusting. Neither do I. That's why the third pile exists. You don't wash those rags. You use them once for the worst jobs and discard them. The difference is that you didn't pay money for a brand new disposable product, and you didn't ruin one of your good cleaning cloths. Storage matters just as much as sorting. Any house system that's inconvenient will eventually be abandoned. That's true of nearly every useful habit. Your clean rags must be at least as easy to reach as the paper towel roll used to be. Ideally, they should be even easier. If you fold them carefully and store them in an upstairs closet, you'll reach for paper towels every time there's a spill. Then you'll conclude that use rags is impractical. Put them where your hand naturally goes. We keep a basket of clean, soft rags on a shelf beside the kitchen sink, in the same place where a paper towel roll might normally sit. Under the sink, we keep a separate container for dirty cloths. As soon as a rag has been used, it goes directly in that bin. There's nothing else to decide and nowhere else to carry it. That simple arrangement is the secret. Clean rags sit within arm's reach. The dirty container is directly below them. There's no searching, no extra walking, and no need to think about the process. In the workshop and barn, we keep entirely separate supply of rough and disposable rags. Cloths used in those areas should never be mixed with kitchen cloths. Anyone who has accidentally wiped a kitchen table with a rag that was previously used in a barn will make that mistake only once. Now let's deal with washing, which is what most people worry about. In reality, it requires far less effort than they imagine. When the dirty rag container becomes full, usually about once a week, you wash the entire load together. Wash rags with other rags, not with your good clothing. Use hot water. A proper hot wash is what allows the cloths to come out clean and fresh instead of musty or sour. Greasy rags require special attention because grease is the one genuine difficulty in this system. Oil doesn't release easily in cold water. You place heavily greased cloths in with the rest of the load, the grease may spread, leaving everything with an unpleasant, slick feeling. Wash moderate greasy rags separate in hot water with a strong, effective soap. If a cloth is completely saturated with grease, move it into the disposable category and throw it away. There's no reason to fight a hopeless battle over a scrap of worn-out fabric. The cloth isn't valuable enough to justify the trouble. The sour or mildewed smell people complain about has one simple cause: placing a soaking, wet rag into a closed container and leave it there for several days. Wet fabric sitting without ventilation will turn sour. That's all that's happening. When a rag is extremely wet, hang it over the side of the bin or place it on a hook until it dries. Then put it in the container. You can also wash the load sooner. Dry rags stored in a bin don't develop that sour odor. Once you understand the cause, the problem is easy to prevent. Now let's go through the actual household jobs, because you're probably wondering whether rags can really handle each specific situation. For normal daily cleaning, wiping a table, clean a counter, or soak a small spill, use one of the soft rags. It will often perform better than paper because it absorbs more liquid, doesn't fall apart, and won't leave little pieces of wet paper behind. For these jobs, there really isn't much competition. The cloth works better. When cleaning mirrors, windows, or other glass, there's another old method that can outperform both paper towels and fabric. Use newspaper. Crumple an old sheet of newspaper into a loose ball and use it to buff the glass. It can leave windows and mirrors clear, bright, and free of streaks in a way that ordinary cloth often doesn't. Paper, towels, and many fabrics release tiny fibers. Those fibers remain on the glass, catch the light, and appear as faint streaks or haze. Newspaper usually doesn't create the same lint. Its paper is dense enough that it doesn't shed easily, and its surface has enough texture to buff the glass until it's dry and clear. Clean the glass with a small amount of vinegar mixed with water. Then polish it dry with crumpled newspaper. The result can be remarkably bright. It costs nothing, gives another use to paper that might otherwise be discarded or burned, and often works better than a product sold specifically for the job. That's the value of older household knowledge in one simple example. For a greasy pan, use a rough rag from the second group. If the pan is especially bad, use one of the disposable cloths from the third group. But before wiping anything, scrape the pan. Remove as much grease as possible and place it into grease container or food scrap bucket. Many people consume far more paper than necessary because they're wiping away material that should have been scraped off first. For drying your hands, hang a cloth on a hook. Let it remain there throughout the day, drying between uses. That's simply a towel. People have dried their hands with reusable towels for centuries. Only recently did it become normal to throw away a fresh sheet of paper every time someone washed their hands. Draining bacon or other fried food presents a fair challenge because ordinary cloth doesn't perform exactly the same way. The traditional solution is a plain brown paper bag or another piece of clean brown paper. A wire rack placed over a plate works even better than either paper or cloth because it allows excess grease to drip away. Newspaper can also be used when nothing else is available. I also want to be honest about the exceptions. Rags aren't the correct answer for every job, and pretending otherwise would be foolish. There are situations where a disposable material is the better choice. Raw meat is the clearest example. If raw chicken has leaked onto a kitchen counter and you clean the liquid with one of your good cloths, that rag must sit in a container until it's washed with everything else. I don't like that idea, and you shouldn't either. For raw meat juices or anything similar foul, use something that can go directly in the trash. Choose a disposable rag from the third group. If all you have is a paper towel, use the paper towel. There's no wisdom in being stubborn, and there's no shame in choosing the correct tool for a hazardous mess. The goal isn't to achieve some kind of perfect purity. The goal is to stop spending money and throwing things away when there's no practical reason to do so. Perhaps 60 times out of every 100, there's no good reason to use something disposable. That's where the savings come from. Since we're already talking about wet cloth, here's another useful trick that has nothing to do with cleaning. On a hot day, you can use a wet rag to chill a drink more quickly. Say 40 with 40 or cat, wrapped drink in the refrigerators, or wrapped drink in the refrigerator. Put it in the freezer and watch the time carefully. The drink will cool much faster than it would if you placed it inside uncovered. The water in the cloth helps carry heat away from the container. As that water cools and begins to evaporate, it draws heat from the bottle or can. Wet fabric also transfers heat much more effectively than still air. Air by itself is a poor conductor, while damp cloth makes close contact with the entire surface. The wet rag is pulling heat away from the drink on every side at the same time. But remember the important limit. Leave a carbonated drink in the freezer for only fine or 20 minutes. Don't forget it. A sealed carbonated drink can freeze, expand, and burst, leaving you with a large mess to clean, and then you'll certainly need those rags. Now, let's look at the actual financial savings, because plain numbers are useful. Suppose a household uses about 1.5 rolls of paper towels every week. That may cost roughly 2 per week, depending on the quality and price of the product. Over a year, that comes to about 100. No, 100 isn't a fortune. There's no need to pretend that it is. But it's still 100 every year, year after years, spent on an item that goes directly in the garbage. Over 10 years, that becomes approximately 1,000 thrown away one sheet at a time. The loss happens so gradually that you never feel the full amount leaving your hand. The rags that replace those paper towels cost nothing. They came from shirts, towels, and sheets you had already purchased, used, and worn out. That raises an interesting question. Who benefits when people forget this kind of household knowledge? I want to be careful here. I'm not suggesting there's some secret group sitting in a room and planning what you do in your kitchen. The reality is quieter and doesn't require any conspiracy. No company earns money when you cut an old shirt into cleaning cloths. However, there's reliable, continuous profit in selling a product that every household must purchase again each week for an entire lifetime. That doesn't automatically make anyone wicked. It's simply the direction in which the money flows. Practical old methods gradually stop being taught because nobody profits from teaching people how to avoid buying something. The knowledge appears the way an unused path becomes covered with weeds. Nobody deliberate destroys it. People simply stop walking there. So let's begin walking that path again. Here's what I'd like you to try. Find one old shirt or towel that's no longer useful for its original purpose. Cut away the seams and turn the remaining fabric into roughly a dozen cloth squares. Place those cloths in a basket exactly where your paper towel roll normally sits. Put a container underneath the sink for the dirty ones. Then use the system for 1 week. You don't have to promise that you'll do it forever. Just live with it for 7 days and notice how often your hand reaches for the cloth basket instead of the paper roll. Afterward, share what happened. Explain how the experiment worked in your home. And if you remember what your parents or grandparents used before paper towels became common, share that too. This is exactly the kind of useful knowledge that disappears when nobody says it aloud. The next time we sit down together, I'm finally going to address something I've been promising for a while. We've discussed ways people stayed cool during summer. We've also discussed keeping lights working when the electrical power fails. But I keep returning to the question of winter. There's a reason an old farmhouse can hold warmth through a bitter cold night while a newer home nearby may lose its heat before morning. It isn't luck, it isn't magic, and it isn't necessarily a better heating system. The answer was built directly in the walls. Next time, I'm going to show you exactly how it worked, and this time, I mean it. Until then, gather your worn-out shirts, cut the usable fabric into squares, and divide the pieces into soft cloths, rough work cloths, and disposable cloths. Keep the clean ones exactly where your hand naturally reaches. Place the dirty, rag container directly below them. Wash the reusable cloths in hot water, and keep some old newspaper near the windows for cleaning glass. The people who built their homes and lives with their own hands understood the value of using everything fully